Hey guys, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome back to another God of War video. Since you guys have been enjoying these theory videos recently, I thought that I could throw another one your way. But today, it is one that has been on my mind for a while, as it's a pretty damn crazy one, I must say. Of all the somewhat bizarre ideas I've ever come up with, this one is definitely out there, but there are most certainly elements here that I do see bleeding over. So, my theory and question today is Thor actually an Atreus from the future? One that has been lost to time and bound by the eternal cycle of Ragnarok. Recently, with all my talk about time travel, paradoxes, and pretty much multiverse theory, after a few recent playthroughs of the 2018 game, I started to pick up on some minor, but pretty crazy things in hindsight, ones that do actually allude to some truth behind this very idea. But at the end of the day, guys, please do remember, this is all just a really fun, but absolutely crazy out there theory, of which I could be looking into things way too deep. So don't expect this to actually take fruition, but please do enjoy it regardless, because in many ways, this video also serves as a pretty interesting analysis of Godhood, the ties of one's own name and family, and the surprising and shocking similarities between Atreus and Thor, as it may actually surprise you just how much the two have in common. But before we do begin, as always guys, I would super appreciate it if we could first get to this video to 500 likes. Not only is it a great way of supporting this video, but also this channel out as a whole. It may sound like a minor thing, but trust me, it really does go a long way. And if you like what we do here and wish to see more God of War content, quick reminder as always to don't forget to subscribe and tick that bell, as there's plenty of content every single week. So without any further ado, let's begin, shall we? Now, what really has sparked this idea recently was covering his background in the history of Atreus. Shameless plug. After exploring his origins and playing through the game again, I purposely started to hone in on Atreus and what exactly surrounds him as a god, as it would give us all a way to somewhat understand the god he's supposed to be molded into. However, as I dove deeper into this hole, the more shocked I actually was to see the similarities between Atreus and Thor. And at the very end of my most recent playthrough, I began to look at that mural in a very different way. Whilst to many, the mural has been interpreted as events that are yet to come or have just happened, with Kratos dying. I say that in air quotes. What is to say that last mural is documenting events that have already happened, because we can visually see that a lot of it has been destroyed and been purposely hidden. At this point in time, we know that Ragnarok is functioning in a cycle, and we ourselves are currently existing and playing through what is believed to be Timeline 2, or at least a timeline that has taken place after the original. With this knowledge in mind, it provokes another question, and that is, how far does the Jotnar ability of foresight truly go into the future? Or even so, what about the past? Well, that's the hard part to explain, because there's nothing that has been said that they can't also look into the past, as well as the future itself. And even without said foresight, the existence of Ragnarok is widely known amongst the 9 realms, as the likes of Mimir, Brock, Sindri, and Odin are aware of the oncoming storm. Plus, you know, it's kinda hard to miss the giant world serpent sitting in Midgard, but Jormungandr's very existence alone is fundamentally important to this theory, as he is living, breathing proof of a previous existing timeline, and how it does spill over into the present. But here is where things begin to get interesting, as well as a little bit confusing, because the World Serpent clearly recognizes who Atreus is, but not the god he will become, for those still fairly newish to Norse mythology and the Norse series. In short, Jormungandr is the child of Loki, the man who Atreus is destined to be. But what if there was a twist to this? because as we see during Fimbulwinter, Atreus is still extremely young, still coming into maturity. So I doubt Jormungandr would be able to recognize him. But what's to say, he only doesn't recognize him because the young Atreus is not wielding a hammer of sorts. Much like the name Loki, Godhood seems to be a bit like a mantle to obtain, whilst one can be born into it. Acquiring said title and embracing it seems to be quite the challenge in itself, with the young Atreus being a hybrid example of this. But what's to say, the name of Thor isn't seen in a similar way as a title. We know that in Asgard, the sons of Thor, Magni and Modi, are in a constant state of competition, both trying to be deemed worthy of Mjolnir's incredible power, wishing to become their father's successor, and maybe in some ways becoming the next Thor. Now, with these ideas laid out, let's actually touch on the similarities on the two, as they share a lot in common. Both Atreus and Thor are in fact half giant, with Atreus' mother being Fae, and Thor's apparent mother being that of Fjorgen. Both mothers have a somewhat mysterious and sketchy past, as Fjorgen herself mysteriously disappeared, whereas Fae is still a figure shrouded in mystery. And let's not forget, she is one that purposely hid her past from both Atreus and Kratos. Finally, both are fundamentally important to the Giants of Jotunheim, as the narrative of these games really does revolve around what happened to them, with Thor being responsible for their genocide and exile, whilst Atreus is the other side of the coin, being destined to bring divine justice upon the Aesir for their genocide. But is someone like the young and naive Atreus really capable of becoming someone as despicable as Thor Odinson? Well, yes, absolutely. Going back again to the 2018 game, I think that Atreus' darker side still lies deep beneath the surface. For those who don't remember, during the middle point of the game, once Atreus learns of his godhood and divinity, the young, shy boy all of a sudden develops and changes into a self-centered, arrogant, and cold persona. What's to say that this dark Atreus will not return once more, especially now with him growing into maturity and actively seeking out his heritage? Because whilst he may be exploring his Jotnar roots, he is still far more in touch with his godhood. Since we are on this topic and the change of character, let's talk about this dark Atreus and his characteristics, as it's actually one that does line up with Thor. Whilst his interactions were brief, they emulate a lot of things we do here in the game world. Starting off with him belittling Sindri, referring to him as little people and how he is a lesser being because the dwarf is not of divine heritage, somewhat seeing him as inferior, much like how Thor sees other races outside of the Aesir. Another sign is Atreus dismissing his own mother, somewhat similar to how Thor dispatched of Fjorgen. But what raised my suspicions, and really was the idea that sparked this video, was specifically after his interaction with Sindri, because if you pay attention to the background, it's a very minor thing, but when Atreus gets mad, you can hear a storm brewing and lightning striking down from the sky. So I think that this is where the idea is somewhat sewn into the narrative. Now, yes, he is the grandson of Zeus, so you would expect some powers to be inherited, like the Spartan Rage. But as we have learned from Mimir, each and every god is unique in its own way, is what makes Atreus so different, in the sense that he has two paths he can choose for what he can become: the slayer of his Jotnar heritage, or avenger of the fallen. And also, let's not forget an important message from Kratos at the end of the 2018 game, where he tells Atreus that he will become the god that he chooses to be. So now that I've laid out the groundwork and foundation, let's actually get to the theory itself. as I believe there is a sliver and a slight possibility that Thor is indeed an Atreus from a previous timeline where their plan failed. So I am, of course, alluding to the mural where Kratos is killed. For what reason, however, is something we clearly don't know. But considering the cycle of patricide is an element that they focused on, wouldn't it make this story that much more tragic if Atreus was the one responsible for accidentally killing his own father, maybe due to some influence from the dark Atreus persona? Or in another scenario, if Atreus was forced by Odin into a decision which ended with Kratos dying in his arms. So the mural, in many ways, is indeed accurate, as it has already come to fruition. And I think if this were the case, and Odin did win, with Atreus no longer guided by the hand of Kratos, I could see Odin stepping in and somewhat weaponizing him, feeding on his grief and poisoning his mind to say that the giants were responsible for his father's death, and how their visions effectively sent them on a suicide mission. Let's not forget, Odin is extremely talented in corruption magic. So I think this is a way to narratively link Thor's unjust hatred towards the giants. Odin's honeyed words could even have him channel and feed on that repressed darkness to the forefront. So the great prophecy of Loki would be lost, and in turn, the persona of Thor Odinson would be pushed forward. But this isn't necessarily the end. The death of Kratos does not halt the likes of Ragnarok, as the cycle still turns. But as we have seen, Jormungandr and Fenrir are clearly alive in the present from their historic battle during Ragnarok itself. But what's to say that Thor didn't suffer a similar fate, and the Dark Atreus was also thrown back in time? Because in Norse mythology, let's not forget, the World Serpent and Thor are both destined to die to each other during Ragnarok. But here, things narratively could not be any more different. Now, the big elephant in the room, at least when it comes to this theory, is the existence of Fjorgen, as she was documented to be one of Odin's greatest lovers, and in this universe, is Thor's mother. But what's to say the giantess didn't just find the young Atreus, simply adopting him into her family? It somewhat creates this linked paradox that allows the story of Atreus and Thor to thread and weave in and out of time, whilst still aligning with the narrative, as well as Atreus' darker side, as he still feeds off his Odin's influence, going on to kill Fjorgen, and then later even hunt his own mother, Laufey of Jotunheim. There's a lot of ideas and crazy possibilities here when it comes to time travel. So there are ways that something like this could indeed be possible in the God of War universe, especially if you ever played God of War 2 and see Kratos pull out the Blade of Olympus from his dying self to then fight Zeus and then not die himself because his previous self did. Multiverse Theory is a bitch. But again guys, this is all a bit of a spitball theory idea, as you can see. But even if this doesn't come to fruition, I hope that you all see and understand the shocking similarities between the two. I myself am interested to see what becomes of Atreus from this point forward, as this game series is centered around him. And it should also be no secret at this point that with Mjolnir coming with the Jotnar edition, it's a given that at some point, Kratos or Atreus are definitely going to be picking that thing up. To what extent, however, is something we don't know. But that is why a theory video like this exists, to explore said idea and concept. But for now guys, I'm going to relay this question to all of you here, and ask, how much of an influence do you think time travel will play in Ragnarok? Do you think anything I say here will actually bleed into the game? Or do you think Thor is simply just Thor? Please do comment down below. I'd love to hear what you all have to say, because it's a great way of running through ideas of what we could see in God of War Ragnarok. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, this has been it for me. So as always, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting as Ragnarok comes for us all. Take care everyone, I'll see you soon.